It's bonus episode time. It's prospect profile time. I've got Sam McGilligan of McKean's Hockey here to talk all about Mikhail Gulyayev and why he could be the most interesting defenseman in the draft.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to bring you the good, the bad, and the ugly, all about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen today, every day. Locked On Blue Jackets continues to be free and available on all podcast platforms. We are over on YouTube and we are on Sirius XM. So if you are a radio app person, you can find Locked On Blue Jackets there. I also want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Now, like I said at the top of the show, it's another prospect profile. We're talking defensemen today, and we're talking about Russian players again. So we're talking about Mikhail Gulyayev today with Sam McGilligan of McKean's Hockey. We're talking about short players dropping in the draft, whether he would replace anyone in the projected future top four for the Blue Jackets, and we have some fun with it. Will he be available at 21? Who knows? I'm just going to get right into the conversation because Sam is much smarter than I am and says it much better. We're doing another prospect profile today. I've got Sam McGilligan back. We talked for a long time yesterday. We didn't get to finish a conversation about Bob McKenzie, but we're going to do that in a minute. First, I want to talk about another little guy who I believe this is the fourth player in a row that I've profiled that is 5'11" or under. And I love when hockey players are just little guys. So this draft has been really good for me in terms of players. But we're going to talk about Mikhail Gulyayev, who is a Russian defender, I believe. Yes.
Yes.
I said that and then immediately questioned it. But let's talk about him because he was over a point per game in the NHL this season, which seems pretty darn good to me.
Okay. You are not going to find they don't make players this divisive out of nowhere. This is interesting. I have had conversations with people all year long about him, and the range of opinions I have heard stretches the whole spectrum of like, I have zero interest in drafting him and I'm ranking him strictly because like you can't not rank him. And then there's I am obsessed with what he can be people. Was in the middle, and then I moved up towards the obsessed side, and then I fell way back, and then slowly creeped up, and then back, and then forward, then back, and now I'm forward again. I'm not joking. That has been the process. It's very interesting. So the MHL is a league where when you look at the production, players will look so much better than they are. And also at the same time, good players might not score. It's a really weird league. It is not structured in any way like pro hockey. It's one of the least projectable leagues I have ever watched. A lot of good individual talent are in it, though. It's not lacking for good players. It's just lacking for cohesion and making these players play together. It's extremely individualistic. Everyone kind of plays like they're Ilya Kovalchuk or Pavel Bure or Michkov or whatever. They have a lot of space and they like to just go all out with the highlights. And you can see some exceptionally frustrating things as a result of this. So Gulyayev kind of falls into this category a little bit in terms of where the production came from. Some of the points weren't so projectable. This has been a point that has been brought up against him. You don't draft Gulyayev for the raw scoring. It will likely come at the end of the process of what you draft him for, but if you draft him to make him a scorer, you likely ruin the player. He is the best skating defenseman you will find in this draft by a mile. Like, it's not even close. You don't get feet like this unless you draft them. Like, if this player makes it, it's because he's going to be a stud. because coaches hate everything about the way he plays. So if he gets through anyways, it's true. He doesn't play a coach's
No,
game
I
at
know.
all. So like if he gets through anyways, it's because he's already overcome a lot of issues. And when that day happens, like you don't find players like him. You at bet maybe there's a small little range of outcome where he's like a power play guy, but the feet are just incredible. He can get a puck in the defensive zone, take 2 strides, move laterally while doing it, drag a player, make one cut, and split through them with all the speed in the world. And every player is like, "What? Where do I go?" He's got like Brad Lambert almost level skating. Like it's like that. Like whoa, they're just different. Like the way they move side to side, as well as the way they move front north south. How much speed they get off of one step when they're slow. The ability to separate. It's really good that he has this because he can't defend.
That was going to be my kind of follow-up question is, will he be able to translate this skill to be an effective defenseman in the NHL?
One of the worst. I don't mean he's destined to be a bad defender, but he is one of the most. I've never played defense before defenders I have ever seen. I don't know how else to describe it, but that he misses the most. Not as bad anymore. This was like an early season thing, but it's a big reason why he's so divisive. He missed basic reads that I just didn't know first round defenders could miss, and it's in the MHL too. So I'm like, whoa, this is a problem. Even I never really was overly convinced it was unfixable. I was more so, I immediately went, how do you convince a coach to play him? Coach is going to be nervous every time he's out there. The good news is Gulyayev all year long did get better. He actually got rapidly better, which makes me think that maybe he was never as bad at reading defenses and just kind of had the approach wrong and like had his head on wrong and was like making bad reads that you shouldn't make or even consider making for a reason that was ultimately addressed because he kind of stopped making them. Now, this doesn't mean he's particularly good. Gulyayev is a player I actually watched right before this. I didn't need to with Leonard, but I did jump in and watch a Gulyayev game. His rush defending leaves so much space, it is out of your mind. He also will manage to commit his weight at the wrong time and then get burned. So he'll give them a space and then he'll try and take it when it's too late and he shouldn't be doing it, and then they'll beat him. The backup to this is you beat him, but then he's right back in your face because he has like gifted feet. He doesn't commit. So much of hockey is just getting a guy to commit his weight and his momentum, and you still have the option to move yours past him. That's often how almost every highlight dangle, that's what that is. It's just a battle of, I beat you, your weight is over here, mine's this way, goodbye, catch up with me. Gulyayev is like, boom, and then he's just right back at them. He has the ability to recover space like no other defenseman can. Like they can't keep up with him. They can't. If let's say David Reinbacher, who's a good skater, if David Reinbacher ends up getting to a point where he overcommits his weight on a guy, I have absolutely seen him not be able to recover. Like he's got the length and the stick reach, and he can make up the position. Like he knows what to do, but sometimes it's not enough. And when you see like maybe the guys in the NHL or in the NL right now aren't burning him, but the NHL guys will burn him. Obviously, you can talk about improvements, but we're not talking about Reinbach. We're talking about Gulyayev. Gulyayev gets burned. Unless it's like already in the slot, he actually has a chance to recover and cut people off unless they're also a gifted skater. This works for him in two different ways, because a lot of gifted skaters who rely on their feet to create their space and create their plays are relying on people being slower than them. Maybe Gulyayev just doesn't bite on these weight commits the same way, because if he gets taught how to mimic footwork properly, he's never going to overly commit his weight. So even if he's not reading the play right, he won't lose track with them. And if the smarter handlers are moving slower and can beat him just by setting him up wrong with their hands, then he's fast enough and agile enough to recover quickly, get the angle back, and maybe make a play from another position. So there's optimism. There's a lot of optimism. Then you also remember the fact that he's going to be coming and playing on shorter, like what's the opposite of width?
Narrow.
Thank
It's
you.
gonna be narrow or ice. Yeah.
Thank you. Why did
It's
doesn't
okay.
matter.
Words are difficult sometimes.
Words
It's
are
fine.
things. When he gets on the smaller NA ice, the skating becomes a larger advantage because it's a small area game already. He's covering these small areas. Like he'll go from small area to small area to small area to small area like that. Like it's just gonna be automatic for him. It's gonna be almost effortless. Then you also remember, and this is where the skating might not be as attractive in smaller ice, but also where like the star power lies with them. The guy has so much position potential in transition. It's like feet like that that can just find space. If he is the guy grabbing your defensive retrieval and he's got a forechecker right on him, he can beat the first forechecker with his feet like it's nothing. Then if there's a second guy coming at him, he's got hands, he's got feet. He's the type of defender to have the tools to beat the first guy and then make the read to beat the second one. It's not unreasonable to picture him getting to that stage. When he beats the second guy, he's going to have all the space in the world and his feet are next level. Like very few defenders skate like him. He will take off like a rocket. Even if he doesn't, you don't want him carrying, you don't ever want a guy carrying each play or like going too out of position. But the threat of him being able to take off like a rocket will like take the last three defenders and they're just going to go whoop right back. Everyone, it's just going to be like it's a push. Like he doesn't even need to do it. It's a structural thing. Like the other defenders are going to be told by their coach, they're like, when he gets space in the offensive zone and forecheckers aren't on him, get back. Because I'm not giving up odd man rushes. I'm not giving up odd man rushes because you flew up because someone tried to cut him off up going at the blue line and they got dangled out of their pants. And now there's a 4-on-2 coming the other way, or someone tried to cut off the passing lanes and left him up the middle, or someone overfocused him and he just passed through them and now it's a 2-on-1. Like there's so many different rush chances that could come with odd man advantages because of his feet. And he knows this, and he kind of is. All the pieces have been slowly getting better at the year of like, if I get defensive retrievals and I beat this player this way, then that means I get this. And if I get a player, if I manage to stop a rush and I check and nobody's attacking me from the middle, I have space here, I can pass back to my partner and just take up off the ice. Like he's starting to make the connections of like where he needs to defend and where he needs to like play. And the reason he might on this, I don't know for sure, but I was told by Will Scouch, not that he's dead, but rest in peace.
Dead. He's just not doing the public scouting.
Rest in peace, public Scouch. He brought up a really good point to me earlier in the season. That was, what if he's just been this fast his whole life, and in Russia, no one's just been like, defend, kid. He's just been so fast that like a forward will like come up and Gulyayev will be so out of position, but Gulyayev closes that gap so quickly and is so good with his stick, not in like using it to like defensively, but just gaining control of the puck. Like it could be the world's worst challenge, but he's so fast that it works out anyways. And then he flies up the ice like a rocket, rinse, repeat 30 times a game. Maybe he gets beat sometimes, but his coach just sees him like just dominating everybody through the speed in every zone. So he's not kind of teaching him the fundamentals as much. Like this is the player. Now he's starting to reach that level where it's like, okay, we kind of need to teach you how to play defense, kid. Is it impossible? Well, no, it's not. It's just, it depends on him, and this is like where I enter like that. I can't speak about the person. Like he could be so smart and has just played this way his whole life, and maybe he's just dedicated to becoming a better defender. Maybe he goes into an interview and he does game tape with somebody and he nails every one of his mistakes and is like, I know I need to get better at this and this and this. This is what I'm thinking when I do it, and this is why I do it. But if I do this instead, and the NHL teams, like, we love, like, we agree with most of what you're saying. We literally like what we were working here with. Like, this is a fit. Let's do this. This guy could be top 5 in the draft down the line.
In a minute, I've got more of my conversation with Sam about Gulyayev. But first, I've got to tell you all about Gametime, because I get stressed out trying to buy tickets constantly. I'm really bad at planning ahead. I tend to find them last minute, and it's a nightmare. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets to all the sports, music, comedy, and theatre near you. With killer deals on last minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you will have. Gametime is the place for last minute ticket deals. You don't have to plan months in advance. They've got deals right up to the day of the event for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theatre, hockey, lacrosse, soccer, I don't know, everything and more. The Gametime guarantee also means that you're going to get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less somewhere else, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. So snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Or a different team gets them and they give up on him after 2 years because he didn't make the improvements they want, or because some guy is just like, hey, look at that gap on the rush, and doesn't want to do any more work with them or work with the finer intricacies that make like what he can be in the defensive zone and in transition so exciting. And he doesn't even become an AHL player. The whole spectrum is open.
It comes back to that debate we were having about Ryan Leonard last episode, actually, of do you take a sure thing or do you take this guy that could dominate, or he could be an AHL player?
Yeah, so like this is the way I've kind of approached the draft this year, and it's kind of the thing going forward. It's like you take your superstars, you take your high impact players with safety. So the Zach Bensons, the Will Smiths, the Oliver Moores, like those guys. Then you enter that next tier of like still high impact and still safe, but you like them a bit less than the other ones. For me this year, that would be the Quentin Musties. The Ryan Leonard would be in this tier, although he's the guy who's bordering in between in the middle. Another Russian defender, Dmitry Simashev, the Axel Sandin Pellikka Swedish defenseman that everybody's been talking about. Like those guys are kind of in like that range. And then the next tier. This is the fun tier. This is the tier where I watch all of these guys slip in the draft every year. This is they aren't as safe. You might not get a player here. You could if you develop them the right way, but I might be speaking a bit too much out of my wheelhouse there. I'm not a developmental expert. But the tools they have are insane. These are the guys who slip through drafts and either become good players, might just be another name on Hockey DB a few years down the line, or they become like the second round, third round, holy Olin Zellweger, Logan Stankoven a couple years
ago. The guys that like drop somehow, and then 3 years later, you're like, how did this guy go in the 5th round?
Yeah, I'm going to be like, for me this year, I already know the one I'm going to watch fall through the draft. The two of them are going to be Jaden Perron and William Whitelaw, both in the USHL. It's like, I'm going to watch these guys slip through the draft. I'm going to be so upset when my team doesn't pick them. Some team's going to pick them. One of them probably won't work out too well, and the other one will, but they're worth the risk. And they have insane skill. Like it's just what they can be is what every player, what every team wants.
Yeah, we just did Jaden Perron last week, actually.
Yeah,
he's a fun guy.
Yeah, he is. He's amazing.
Project.
And he's one of my favorite players. Gulyayev's in this tier as well. You could actually, because of the feat, you can legitimately say he's the best player in this tier. I think that's a fair assumption. And if you're confident in what he can be, then he immediately jumps into like the top 13.
So the question I've kind of been looking at with defensemen is the Blue Jackets have a lot of defensemen in the pipeline at the minute. You know,
you guys do.
Is he going to break into, and like I've kind of been looking at the future top 4 of Werenski, Jiricek, Matejchuk, maybe Kuhlman's. Like, is he good enough to knock any of those guys out of the top 4? You've got Stanislav Svozil, who I didn't even mention. You know, Samuel Konasco, who had a real good season.
He could knock all of them easily except for Jiricek and Werenski. Werenski is just a proven star, and Jiricek is just different. I don't need to tell Columbus fans what David
so
Jiricek
excited
is.
about
He's
Jiricek.
different. He's just different.
We did a lot of, if I remember rightly, we did a lot of yelling in Twitter DMs when Jiricek went to Columbus about it.
Matejchuk.
Yeah, so you think that he could potentially be the third best name on that list?
I think I like Gulyayev as a prospect more than Matejchuk. Some people might hit me with a bat for that. I see the argument both ways. Matejchuk is definitely the safer player. I don't think Denton has Denton's like an interesting example of like, I don't know if he has the feet to do what he does in the NHL. And I don't know if he's the player he is right now if he's not doing what he does. Like, Denton Matejchuk is going to be a player I cannot wait to see what happens with him. I was on the lower side. I was about as low as you found him. Like, I was almost the end of the first, not because I didn't love the idea of what he could be, but just because he scared me. And I was like, I don't know. He basically played fourth forward for Red Deer last year. If you play fourth forward and you're not a fast skater, that is like a combination of red flags where I'm like, I don't know what to do with you. And there's just other players that I feel better about. But I liked him a lot. Gulyayev is going to be an equal, like, I don't know what to do with you, but he's more on the tool side. And every year I do this more and more, the more I realize maybe you don't pass on the guys with the insane toolkit because some dude did something you liked a little bit more. Like, kind of put the bias aside and just look at it for what it is. Gulyayev's feet are insane. It's like
very much like you draft Kent Johnson for his hands.
Yes.
And everything else will catch up eventually.
Yes, it's funny you say that because I loved Ken Johnson's draft here, and it's not like I ranked him low. I think he was like 7 or 8 or something, but it's like I look back at it and it's like there is no way Ken Johnson would slip out of my top 5 today. Like, no way. Like, I look at him, I'm like, I'll never fall for that one again. He was all hands with his feet doing so little to help support the hands and set them up. And you're like, I don't know if that's projectable. And then he kind of started working on it. And even though he doesn't have the separation, like the footwork is so much better at just like misleading people. Like his feet point one way and then his hands can do some wizardry out of nowhere. And you're like, oh, okay. Like there's the separation. Anything else he gets from just pure like explosiveness and athletic ability on the feet in terms of just like gaining space off a stride or two is just gravy at this point. Johnson's ceiling is as high as that skill can get at this point. Like, as the faster and more agile he gets and the stronger he gets, that's his ceiling. He's going to be a star.
Yeah, like once he stops being a string bean, I think it's going to be really fun because he's like, I always forget that he's like 6'1" because he has such little guy energy.
I always thought he was 5'10".
He's 6'1" and like 175 pounds or something. And when he like manages to put weight on and keep it on, I think, and this is not an episode about Ken Johnson because we could talk about Ken Johnson for the next 45 minutes, but he's so much fun, and I think he had a really underrated season in Columbus. I was watching him every night basically, and you can see him getting it, and it was so much fun.
Oh my god, yeah! I thought he in his D+2 is what I thought he could be in his D+4, and I still had him as a top 10 guy. And he was the 21 draft, which was the weird COVID year and a bunch of different things. That was like the year where I think the last pieces of the puzzle kind of started to click with me, and I was like, man. Being nitpicky is dangerous. Like there's a reason to look deeper because you should always look deeper and not just take things at surface level. But the second you're like, I don't like this, you got to ask yourself, you're like, is it because I like literally I don't like this? Like that's not my style of play. Or is it because like I'm sitting there like, oh boy, that's concerning. Because if it's about me, well, that's why I had Kent Johnson at 8 and why I would have taken Brant Clark over him. Brant Clark's a great player and a good prospect, but today I am never making a selection where I'm taking Brant Clark over Kent Johnson. I would have taken Fabian Lysell over him. That one's still close because Lysell's feet are just absurd and his hands are also absurd, but I don't think like Lysell never did what Johnson did with the creativity and the mindset. And it's like that. And if you're looking, by the way, who is that this year, it's Will Smith. Will Smith is Kent Johnson this year, except just a better skater already. Like they're both insane.
Yeah, so I want to. That's actually that segues really nicely into kind of what I wanted to talk about next, which was Bob McKenzie's top 12 rankings came out today, and everyone is losing their minds about Will Smith being listed as third. I would not have put him there. Like with my limited prospect knowledge, I have a very basic kind of board of guys that I like and who I would go and who should go where, etc. How much of McKenzie's rankings do you think are he talks to all of the teams, finds out who they're looking at, and then puts his rankings? Because I remember when I started looking into prospect stuff, someone was like, yeah, Bob McKenzie has like a 98% accuracy rate in his rankings. And so I think a lot of people are looking at that and being like, no, Carlson's a better player, Mitchkov's a better player, blah, blah, blah.
It doesn't matter. That like he is not that he like Corey Pronman, Scott Wheeler, those guys, they're the ones who are like the industry, they're the ones with the big platforms. They're the ones who, if you're doing that, or you can go a little further and find the more, us, like the me's and the Tony Ferrari. Actually, who am I kidding? Tony Ferrari is a much bigger name now. I'm boosting myself with that one, but
listen, fake it till you make it, buddy,
Exactly. McKenzie is different. McKenzie isn't trying to tell you what he thinks. McKenzie is out there talking to the people who are going to be making the damn picks, and they're telling him what they're thinking.
So I wonder if Chicago really likes Will Smith.
It could be that. The thing is it's not done by team. It's not like, this is where the disconnect comes from, like the actual draft. He doesn't speak to any specific team drafting in a spot. So like last year, he had to clarify, and people are kind of still don't seem to fully get this. When Slafkovsky went first, he called it a week before in his rankings. The second I saw that, I was like, oh, crap, we're taking Slafkovsky first, aren't we? But he also specifically wrote in the thing, I don't know who Montreal is taking. Montreal, as far as everyone is aware, it's still a 50-50 call in there. And it was still a 50-50 call in there. It really went, supposedly it was leaning Slafkovsky, but the final decision was made the day of the draft. So like they
ended up getting Kirby Dach, and there was their top 6 center, I guess.
Yeah.
So is it a case of McKenzie's talking to all of the teams and saying, who do you like? What's your list?
He's getting lists. He's
like
getting
amalgamation of
he's
everyone
getting their
has
lists.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, I think, from what I know, and the fewest, littlest threads that connect me to NHL scouts and like the direct hearing that I can get that aren't public, there are some pretty interesting people who work in the NHL in terms of making decisions. Now, I don't mean this in like a oh, they're interesting. Like there are some geniuses working in that league with some philosophies and stuff that are just brilliant, that like really account for a lot of factors that the public don't. These guys, I don't think, are the ones that are getting interviewed. I'm not saying the ones that aren't interesting or aren't skilled themselves. I think what they do is that these are the ones that are more prototypical thinking to like kind of how head scouts view it and how GMs view it, and the approach of you can't miss with your pick or you're getting fired if it's in the top 10, like those type of guys. And he gets his pull from them, and it almost always, it does end up being pretty close to the draft. Like he calls it a lot of the time for a reason, and he's being told Smith number 3 by people.
Yeah, that was my understanding, because there were a lot of people getting really angry about Smith not being as good as other players, and then I looked at it and was like, okay, if Bob McKenzie, but like you cannot tell me that Bob McKenzie is not talking to every single person who might have something regarding a say in this draft to get their opinion.
Yeah,
it's not who he thinks is the best player; it's who the NHL has going first overall, second overall, third overall, whatever.
And the Smith thing is interesting because a week ago today, I sent a message in a chat to a couple of friends who I trust, and I said, am I a complete dumbass for thinking there is an argument for Will Smith at 4 above Leo Carlsson? And I was met with a resounding Yes. And I get where they're coming from, and I don't think I do it. I still think I have Leo 4, but it's about, like, sometimes it just comes down to what you want. Not Michkov and Carlson don't really do what Smith do. That came out broken.
Doesn't do what Smith does. Yeah.
Thank you. Will Smith is Kent Johnson. Will Smith is Trevor Zegras. Will Smith is that. When he starts popping in highlight reels down the line, the people talking right now are going to shut up immediately, because they're going to be like, holy, look at this kid and what he can do. He's probably going to get overrated, if anything, because of what he can do. And that's not me saying it as someone who doesn't like him, because I adore him as a player. It's just like, it'll be like Zegras, where people think Zegras is like borderline generational because his skill level is insane, but like, he's not helping win hockey games like a generational player would. He's a fantastic first-line player. Will Smith is probably on that same path. Ken Johnson's on that path. Johnson's also kind of a really good two-way player, surprisingly.
Yeah, I know. I was also shocked about that.
I can't believe.
No disrespect to Ken Johnson.
I just can't. Like, he's the type of player that shows you, like, development is real. Like, the development is real.
Shout out to Rick Nash, who we actually discussed on the podcast last week as well, and who is in charge of player development for the Blue Jackets. So any success that you see is probably because he's been working with Rick Nash 3 times a week for the past year. So,
yeah, well, shout out to Rick Nash. You were doing the Lord's work.
Exactly. So I want to go back to Gulyayev, just to kind of wrap this up. So you put him in the Blue Jacket pipeline, and immediately not immediately, but you think there's space for him on this Blue Jackets blue line?
1,000%. I don't, like, you guys are so defensive heavy that you don't need him, especially because he's a risk. If you're gonna, my evaluation is, if you're gonna take a defenseman, you take the risk. If you're Columbus, you've already got the pipeline assured. You can argue a bunch of different ways that taking a defensive risk for upside when you already have kind of like a steady core kind of going in there, and you have a future first pairing as well. Like, you're not a team who needs to look for one. Werenski likely ages well too, and Juracek is going to be in his prime.
And he's also like 25 right now.
Yeah, Werenski was a 20, so. Like, he was a 2015 draft pick. Like, he's not old. He's entering his prime, and he's going to age well. So, like, you've got that as your top lefty secured. If you find someone better than him, then you instantly are in, or you've probably entered best D-core in the league conversation at the very least. If you have Juracek on your right side, all things say that he should be your first pairing on the right side. They even complement each other stylistically. You're set. Your second pairing, it kind of will come down to who's going to come up. I'll be honest, it'll probably be one of those guys in a pick getting traded for an upgrade, because that's often how these things goes when teams kind of move up. But Svozil, as a player, I've actually dropped on a bit since the draft. I just doesn't have the tools. It's the thing of, like, he's really smart. He'll be a third pairing guy most likely, but like all the offensive stuff, Regina, he plays with Bedard. I know it's such a simplistic viewpoint considering all the points I brought up earlier, but that one's legit. That one's just like, he ain't creating them. He's just in the right spot at the right time because he's a smart player, and that's what you want to see. But junior hockey ain't pro. Like, there's going to be a wall. He'll most likely be just a reliable, smart dude in his own zone with a good first pass, and that's a.
See, you're forgetting that the Blue Jackets are going to win the draft lottery, and Bedard's going to come here, and Svozil's just going to get 70 assists a season playing with his old teammate. You know.
Please don't win the lottery. I need Montreal to win it, or else we might.
No, absolutely not. You had one and you ruined it. You broke yours. You don't get another one until you've shown that you can be trusted.
Edmonton got McDavid.
Edmonton is an outlier. And
yes, again, and I hate it. I want to be an outlier too.
So, no, Montreal can't have it. Like, he's gonna go to Anaheim, and I'm gonna be mad about it forever.
It'll be fun, though.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be a ton of fun, but I'm going to be mad about it.
Oh, man.
As someone marrying into a San Jose Sharks fan base, I'm going to be mad about having to play Bedard like 5 times a season for the next 20 years.
That's completely fair, but I'm just going to say.
let's finish off because again, I feel like every time we record, we could easily go for like an hour and a half just talking all kinds of prospect stuff.
Yeah.
But let's wrap up and where is Gulyayev on your board? Is he that? So the Blue Jackets are probably going to be picking between 21 and 23, depending on whether Florida
I will
and
be
Seattle.
surprised if he's not on the board by then, if I'm being honest with you. Like if he's
You'd
off
be
the
surprised
board,
if he's gone
if he's taken before then, I'm surprised.
Gotcha.
He's not. Okay. I don't know. He's this weird. I can't even guess where he goes. He checks off so many boxes in the he's the type to slip draft. He checks so many boxes in the he's the type that one team has him at like 6th overall. Like he's in both categories where you're like, ay. The public will likely just settle with him in the 11 to like 25-ish range outside of maybe one or two outlets that are a bit lower on him because of the defensive projection. I have him 17 with the names ahead being like Otto Stenberg, Jaden Perron, Daniil Butt, Quentin Musty, and those are all like rock solid prospects. Like those are good players, and there are good players after him. I'm lower on Reinbacher than I am on Gulyayev. I'm also just lower on Reinbacher in general.
He's another name that was interesting on Mackenzie's list. We can't get into that. Maybe we'll just do a third episode where I ask you all kinds of random prospect questions. But he was another name on Mackenzie's list that surprised me because he seems to have kind of come out of nowhere and now he's ranked 10th overall.
Yeah.
But
I would say ultimately Gulyayev is most likely looked at as the number 4 defender in the draft by many. It'll be Axel Sandin Pellikka and Reinbacher leading the show. Some team is going to love Dmitry Simashev to death because he's what people think David Reinbacher is. And then it's really open. And I think Gulyayev kind of takes that spot. Luca Cagnoni is the only other one where I'm like, yeah, okay. Well, I can see that.
It feels weirdly light on defense.
It's like 2020 where it was like a stacked draft for forwards, but like the
like
defenders were a little light, and they also weren't the type of players that like matched those aggressive forwards. There was like one. It was like Axel Sandin Pellikka this year. It was like Jamie Drysdale that year.
Yeah. If people want to, like I do, pick your brains about all kind of prospect stuff and like learn more, where can people find you and your work online?
You can find me at Sam_McGilligan, McGilligan. I have to spell it every time. On Twitter, you can find work that I have contributed to on McKean's Hockey and Puck Preps. And once in a while, something actually comes out on that Substack of mine at sammcgilligan.substack.com. May or may not have a Gabe Perreault piece that I wrote and I've just been sitting on because I don't know if I want to post it. I don't know if it'll fall into the void and be ignored or if it will light Twitter on fire because Perreault debates have been insane the last 2 weeks. And I don't know what I want to do with it. So I'm kind of just...
Do it. Rip the Band-Aid off. Do it.
Maybe. Maybe. I don't know. But if you want to know if I ever do release it, you can find that there.
And that's all I've got for you today. Tomorrow, Hayden will be back, and we are talking all about Patrik Laine. It's our Patrik Laine season in review episode tomorrow. Make sure you check that out. Thank you for listening. Thank you for making this your first listen of the day every day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms. We're over on YouTube, and thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Every day is. I appreciate you. If you're not an everydayer yet, I still appreciate you, but maybe you should think about becoming one. Subscribe over on YouTube on every podcasting app of choice. Check us out on Sirius XM. You can find me at _Jacob Foster on Twitter, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find Hayden at HaydenH971. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email us at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you once again for listening. And until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.